this is going to be your highest priority because it's what's going to actually let the pants close on stage, which is kind of the goal for getting colors on stage to see them with lights tonight if we can. Does that make sense so far? So what we're doing is just inserting this fly, and then the next priority, and I actually wrote these up there for pants team, the next priority will be waistbands. So if you get the fly in waistbands next, even if you've been working on the bottom of the pants, the hem, making sure that they can go on a human waist would be the highest priority, yeah? Mm-hmm. So, these are Andrews. You're gonna have somewhere in your pile something that looks kind of like this, like the sake shaped ones, yeah? Mm-hmm. You should have at least 4 of them. I think some people have 8 because I got overexcited at some point. So just like, you only need 4 of them, I promise. But they're the sake shaped dudes. And we're gonna sew seams. So on both of them, we're going to basically sew along the curved side, the outer curve. I guess they're both technically curved, but the outside curve. And then from there, the steps are going to differ. So we're going to do the outside curve on both, and then we deviate, right versus left. So I'm going to come over here. Use whatever seam allowance you've been using. I'm doing an anchor stitch, so yes to anchor stitch, this is a seam. I'm starting at the top of the outer curve. Sewing around that curve, just like we practiced the first day of sewing machine class. Sewing machine class. And then give it a little anchor stitch too. You don't need to anchor stitch the bottom, it will help to anchor stitch the top in this particular case. I'm gonna do that on both of them. Exactly the same way. Good news is they all look exactly the same. If you have some in your lining fabric versus some in your fashion fabric, your actual pant fabric, that might make a difference, but most of them should be identical, I think. I can literally feel the sound of that. Okay. Once we get here, I don't know why. Somebody left like these tiny kid scissors. We're going with it. All right, we're just gonna go with it. So at the bottom of the curve, at the bottom toe of the sock, right? We're gonna trim pretty close to. We're gonna trim it down the same way we did with our pockets and our little drawstring or our little bands at the beginning. The first class that we were working on these pants, this is the most annoying thing I've ever done in my entire life, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm committed now. We're gonna go ahead and trim. You don't need to trim all the way up. Just around the bulk of the curve, basically around the heel of the sock, if that makes sense. And then you can just like sort of wander off the edge. That's all you really need to trim. Should you hand me a pair of scissors that are real and you have and I'm going to do that on both of them. The only reason we're doing that is because we're going to be flipping this inside out the same way that we did with our pockets and our little bandies. So it's always going to be easier to do that on a curve or a point if we've trimmed down the edges. And then I'm going to take both of these over here. I'm going to do the dude that we're pretty familiar with right now. I'm going to spray them. I'm going to turn them inside out. I'm going to give them a good like press from the inside to get them so that we have that nice seam showing as much as possible, especially around the curve. Put a little bit of pressure on it. Spray it again from the outside just because I'm feeling enthusiastic and festive. And then we're gonna press it so that it's one shape. I like with things like this, and I'm gonna go ahead and see if we can get you a close-up. I find it easier to press it nicely if I roll it kind of like this, so the seam is actually just set in a tiny bit. That's for ease. If you can roll it more easily where the seam actually hits the actual edge, go for it. That's just a choice of, it tends to come out a little bit smoother and nicer for me when I do that. It's just a little bit inset. So if it doesn't do that for you, if there's an easier way to do it where it's just behaving like it's supposed to, go for it. Give him a nice press, flip it over, press from the other side too, in this particular case. Do the same thing to the other one. So So up until this point, you have two identical socks that are now have an edge and are flipped inside out. Congratulations. Now we're gonna go put these into actual pant land. So everybody is gonna have some kind of pins indicating where your pants seam, front center seam, actually joined on the person. For some people that's very, very close to the edge. For some people it's further away. So for this, I chose a poor one to do a demo because I cut these weirdly, but for this, we can see it's pretty much right at the edge. It's a little bit in, but not so in that it like makes a big difference, especially down here where we're gonna go close to the seam if we can. But we can see that up here, it's pretty much close to the edge. So I'm gonna use a regular seam allowance. Some of you are gonna have a pin that's further in, somewhere like this. You can trim off some excess. What I did for that demo pair that I showed you, just to show you like what it's supposed to look like at the end, I just kind of like folded over the excess and like started my little thing there. So if you are unsure what to do with that excess, go ahead and ask. But we don't want to just cut off, like if my pin was here, that's how close in it is on Andrew's waist, for example. I wouldn't want to be that deep all the way down because then I'm cutting into the crotch line. So I would want to create a line that starts here, that's where it closes at the waist, and eventually tapers out into the crotch line we already have. Does that make sense? Because the crotch line we already have is what he tried on, and we know that that fits in. So in this case, that wasn't the case. They pretty much just fit close together. So we're gonna go ahead and ignore these pins because we don't need them. It's just a regular seam allowance. A regular seam allowance. And on one side, we are going to press this, the inside of the sock, the side that's open right now. We're going to press the edges inward. The way that this pocket works, I'm going to show you because it's going to help contextualize. Because I know this is hard to imagine until we do it. This is the side of the pants that we already have. We attach a placket that goes outward, and we attach a placket that goes inward. They layer over top of each other to create an invisible closure. So it's a bunch of layers of fabric, and what that allows us to do, for example, there would be buttonholes in this if we were doing buttons instead of snaps, that would layer through these layers of fabric but would not come out the front. That's the Victorian version of an invisible closure, right? That's the best that we had. This is a placket that is reinforced with a couple layers of fabric so that it can hold the base of the buttons. We can take a lot of tension. There's more layers of fabric there. And they can layer over top of each other. So where the seam, the waist closed, that's exactly where these two match up. So we're going to do the outer one first, or the inner one first, sorry, I lied to you. And to do that, you're going to take one sock, doesn't matter which one. If you had one that was one lining, you only have one piece of this, or two pieces of this that are in lining fabric and two pieces that are in fashion fabric, you would want the inner one, this one that we're doing right now, to be the one that's in your lining fabric because it goes underneath and the other one goes in the front. Doesn't matter, neither of them really show. It's all fine. That is not the thing to worry about. So what we want to end up with is two pieces like this, where that ragged edge is turned inside. Seam that we put in, we turned it out, flipped it inside out, and then we take the raw edges that are left, fold them under so that they are going the same direction as the seam, and it's all hidden, and we have a nice sock with no raw edges except at the top. Make sense? Mm-hmm. With me so far?
I think so.
We'll get there. So then, going back to my actual pant. What I am then going to do is basically enclose this rough edge, which just means I'm gonna put this boy here. That's all I'm doing. If you have a stripe, you can line it up with a stripe. That's kind of nice, but it won't always work for everyone. So raw edge of one side of the pant is just going inside these edges that we've just pressed over and made.
Huh.
We're just enveloping. Sandwiching, if you will. Whatever metaphor of things that go between things you would like to use that makes sense to you. Thank you.
No, sorry. No, I was just thinking, he's like, hot dogs, right? I'm like, no. Please don't say that, Rick. Sorry, my brain.
But is a hot dog a sandwich? That's the question. Because I already said sandwich.
And then you'd have to talk about tacos. And this is not going on the video. We can argue this
These
afterwards.
don't get edited.
I can argue afterwards.
For the record, it's all Rick's fault. Okay. I opened up a little bit of this at the bottom. I had put that seam in. I opened it up a little bit. You can see that there's a lot here, right? There's a lot going on to kind of make it smoothly blend transition into the pants. A lot of that gets trimmed. So you go until it looks like nice and neat, and then this excess you're going to go ahead and trim off, and it'll vanish into the void of the inside of the pants. So what you want to end up with is that raw edge enveloped in here. Ta-da, he's gone. Now you want to go ahead and go in and top stitch this. Now in this case, I noticed that I pressed them a little bit off. If I were not demonstrating for you, I would go ahead and make sure that they're more even, because I don't want my top stitch here to miss this one, if that makes sense. Can we see how it's like a little bit off?
Yeah.
So theoretically, if I was just sitting here minding my own business, I would go ahead and fix that. I don't want to take up that time for you, but do we understand, or should I take up that time? If they're even, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll go in and I would top stitch this. And in this case, because this one is going to vanish into the void, and because I'm tired, I'm going to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch to make sure that I catch both of those. So it's just going to bounce back and forth. You
But
do
we don't
this,
have to do that.
yeah, do it as a straight stitch. This is just a time-saving maneuver that is not necessary in any other way. So for people on video, you would do this as a straight stitch. You can see my zigzag stitch. I'm just doing that because I hecked up and I don't want to fix it. Chaotic stitching.
As long as the cast don't see it.
Well, they will. It will be on their body. They'll know. Andrew will forgive me. Probably.
The show has a lot of themes. A wardrobe malfunction is not out of the question.
Well, it's not gonna. If it was gonna affect the structural, essentially safety of a performer, like being able to wear something on stage without it falling off, I would not be taking a shortcut. But since it's not, we don't care.
Fair.
It's prioritizing shortcuts. What are the ones that are gonna actually cause any problems versus what are the ones that aren't? Do I always guess right? No. But more often than not.
So that one can be anchor stitched
So
on
that I
both sides.
knew, yeah, exactly. It should absolutely be anchor stitched on both sides. And then as we can see, we've got this little tuft of like, bleh, which you can go ahead and just be like, goodbye. Goodbye, Krill World. Leave us.
Same. Sorry, that was supposed to come out loud.
Okay, so that's side one. This is called a placket. Anytime we make a little extension thingy that other thingies attach to or layer over to connect two things, but also be able to unconnect them, it's a placket. You probably have it in your jeans. It's just how pants do, of some kind or some shape. And from the front, we can see all this weirdness. You go away. You do not exist. So my second piece. This is where we see that I cut weird, not on purpose. I cut weird because this piece of fabric, when I was cutting layered over, folded over, like I showed you guys, I didn't check to make sure that it was even all the way around, so it wasn't. So this is going to be a weird thing. I'm going to demonstrate it, but just know that I have created weirdness that I will now have to fix. Good news, it'll be fixed in the next 6 hours. Why? Because that's the choice we have. So what you're going to do is put right sides together here. Look where your seams are. We don't want to do it inside out. This is my right side. We can see because my seams are closed, my raw stuff is in here. So my right side, I'm going to place this boy against my right side. Pin him down, all the way down. Bum, 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 bum. All the way down. And then I'm going to stitch him as if it's a seam. So I'm going to put an anchor stitch at both sides, both ends. Excuse you. Help if I hit the right button. In case anyone's wondering, Friday is the last time I slept.
Oh.
So if I seem stranger than usual, that's the reason.
I feel like insomnia's going around in general.
We had to make alternative ensemble pieces because we still haven't gotten our order of ensemble jackets that they're all supposed to have. All the boys are supposed to have. We were supposed to get it like 2 weeks ago, and it's still not here. So I spent most of the weekend making an alternative for them in case it doesn't come in. So yay, 10 new garments that we weren't planning to build. So all I did is attach that as a seam to the other side, the side that I have not attached a placket to. And then I'm gonna flip it to the inside, the wrong side of my pants. Ba-bam. The way to do that, to make sure that it looks as nice as it can, because this is a piece that's gonna show. Give him a good spray. Press it flat first.
Is that good?
Anytime that a seam is really, really fighting you when you're trying to turn something in or over, press it flat first to open up the seam, convince those fibers that they're supposed to be separate and away from each other, and then press it the direction you actually want it, which in this case is like this. And now we can start to see how we've accomplished the little demo boy that we had at the beginning. This one goes to the inside, so we sewed it together here, turned it to the inside, and now this is one flat piece that joins right here, and it does that thing. Yeah? Right? Magic.
Crazy.
And if I had cut these pant legs right, it would be even more magical. So then what I would do, and you can do this one of two ways, is I would top stitch. So I would start down here. I would trim this off first so that I'm not going over layers I don't need to go over. I would start down here, and I would top stitch this exact shape. Personally, I haven't been pinning them because I find that the pins get in the way, but it depends how wiggly your fabric is. So if your fabric's quite soft and it's like just hanging out doing a flop, like go ahead and pin it down. For this, I probably wouldn't. You can do it by feel from the front if you want to make sure that the shape on your front is nice. So what we're going for, the top stitch that we're looking at, is like this. Right? We're going for that curve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going around the edge of that. You can do it from the back where you can see this placket. That's the easiest way to make sure that you're getting it down. You could also do it from the front like I did with this because you can kind of do it by feel. I would recommend doing it from this side, where you guys are at for the most part. Do we need me to top stitch this to demonstrate it, or do we feel like we understand so far?
Just go ahead.
No, just go ahead and do it.
Just go ahead.
So I'm gonna do it two ways, or I'm gonna start one way and then do it the other way. So what I meant by doing it from the front, I can't see anything, right? It just looks like a front piece of fabric. My fingers can feel it though. So I'm going by that texture. And I'm keeping my fingers close to, but not in the line of fire of the needle. Putting my needle down, and I can feel this edge, where that extra layer of fabric is. And if I want be extra sure that my front looks nice, I can do it from here. Be like top stitch. To be clear, these are options. Do not do both. You don't have to do both. But I would just go along here, and I'm using my sense of touch to guide me.
In this one, there's no anchor, right?
In this one, there's no, well, it can't hurt to put an anchor, but you are going to put in a waistband. So it also doesn't make a huge difference because the waistband's going in pretty soon either way. If you ever see me forgetting to put an anchor stitch in, it's usually because I know the next step makes it not matter. But sometimes I know that in my head and I forget to say that out loud. If you were going to do it in the way where you're the most sure, what are you doing? Come on, buddy. Talk to me. Would you give me another bobbin? Doesn't really matter what color. Dark would be good. Darkish. Excuse me. Then I would start whichever way is easiest for me to start. It doesn't matter if you start at the top or the bottom. And this is where you may encounter these feet are not super friendly to multiple layers of fabric. That's part of them being domestic instead of industrial machines. So I put down my foot, and I'm keeping this edge close to this edge is how I'm guiding myself. And go from here, around that curve. You could pin this again. It's between you and your fabric gods, how you're gonna get the best result. And go all the way up this way.
So we can do either way.
You can do either way.
Okay.
Just some options. You could also avoid doing that I just did. Or you could do that and, you know, live your best life. But what we end up with is this stitched shape of the fly, which we should be familiar with from looking at jeans, right? We've all had pants that have this. Even if we've never noticed before, you're going to notice it forever now. You have this stitched shape, which goes over this placket that we've already made and gives us a functional fly. Lab today will probably be putting snaps on everybody's, so that's something that I'm planning to have them do so that we have enough closures on there just to make sure people can put on pants and they stay up. That's the whole dream. Yeah? Questions so far? Concerns? Fears?
When is that video gonna be?
I can upload it now. I can totally do that.
As for fears, I am generally afraid of spiders.
I'm trying to figure out how to get spiders. I don't
Please
think
don't.
I would not.